All right. Well, welcome everybody to another midweek program with the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. This is a fun one. This is one that all of us on horticulture staff really like because we always like hearing each other's opinions on gardening questions and topics and things like that. So again, I'm Mark Wethington. I'm director here at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. I'm joined with Douglas Ruin here, who's our gardens manager, who you are probably quite familiar with since he's done a lot of these programs, and Tim Alderton, who's horticulturist here. So again, probably quite familiar with him from some of the tours. And they're going to have some things to talk about as we get going, so to kind of get us all ready to ask questions. But I want our interns to introduce themselves. We got a fantastic group of interns, so you can get your name, your where you're going to school and what your major is and what your year is, and maybe your favorite plant so far in the Arboretum that won't be on the tour next week.
Okay, my name is Trace Fulbright, and I attend Tennessee State University. I'm a horticulture major, and I'm a senior. My favorite plant at the Arboretum that is not on the tour, I'm just gonna say it's a big flowering butterfly bush. I'm not gonna specify.
Fair enough.
Hi, my name is Skylar Dewall. I go to Campbell University. I'm an environmental science major. I'm a rising senior, and my favorite plant in the garden that is not on the tour is the root beer plant.
Dude, what's the last?
I do not know. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
It's a piper oritum. Same sandwich as culinary pepper.
Hello, my name is Julio Ford. I know that Piedmont Tech is in North Carolina. My major is horticulture. And this lighthead right here is my favorite plant. I don't know
We're going to have Doug talk about that a little bit in just a minute.
Hi, everybody. My name is Thomas. I am a senior at Brown studying urban studies, so not super horticulture related, but I'm having a fun time tying a bunch of things together. I think I'd say my favorite plant that won't be on my tour so far is I had a really good time pulling out some dogwoods the other day. So I think that's a memorable experience that I had. But we have the dogwoods that we're not pulling out that I also enjoy a whole lot. So I'll pass it back over there, but I'll start. That was my favorite.
Love it. We're teaching for the urban studies. We're teaching them all about, agaves and cacti and all kinds of thorny things that, for directed traffic. All right. So unprompted, Tim and Doug have brought in a bunch of plants to talk about, just some things that are happening out at the Arboretum. Tim, you want to start?
Okay. The first, I have one. Okay. The first plant I have here, it's not quite open yet, but this is one to come to the Arboretum in the next month to see. This is Eminopterus Henry Eye. Chinese Eminopterus, I believe, is the common name for that. This is a plant in the Rubiaceae, so this is the coffee family. And this family to me is just really cool. It has all kinds of different things in it. So if anybody's familiar with our native wildflowers, we have bluettes here, Houstonias, and some of the bed straws. They are annuals and herbaceous perennials. And then we have some other species in the garden. There's some vine species, Manettia, and then there's shrubby species in the same family, including this Adina here. And Doug's going to talk about Cephalanthus over there. I just find that a 40, 50 foot tall tree to an herbaceous perennial or an annual can all be found in the same family. But anyways, this Eminopterus, going back to that, this is a rare one from China. Wilson found this or brought it back, I guess, in early 1900s, around 1907 or so. It's been in Europe for a long time. JC had visited Europe in the 80s, and he was able to see a large one there. And at that time, it was like 89. I'm looking at an old article he had written, and he was just thought it was one of the most remarkable plants he had seen. And he was said at that time in 89, our plant was about 6 feet tall. And today it's, I'm going to say 45 to 50 probably range. But this year, it doesn't always flower well, but this year it just has wonderful bud set. So I'm thinking about 2 to 3 weeks, it should be in its peak. So come out and see that plant.
And to add on to that, another plant in that family is Gardenia, and Eminopterus is intensely fragrant. My first experience with the Eminopterus in flower was before I worked here at the Arboretum, but I was visiting, and I can tell you it was beginning of August because it was right after the old Southern Nurserymen's Association meeting, which was always the first weekend in August. And I came up and I was taking pictures, and I could smell this plant. Those who've been watching me for the past year know I always say I have a terrible sense of smell. I could smell this and could not figure out what it was. Finally tracked it down to this tree. And one of the reasons it's been so rare is because in Europe, it is so shy to flower. It takes a long time to come to flower, but it really likes our heat, which brings it into flower. And so there would be trees in Europe that were, in England that were 20, 25, 30 years old that never flowered. And so there was never seed to distribute from it. So we've distributed seed multiple times from this and plants. It's awesome, awesome thing. Worth the trip to come out just to see this in flower. So, and once it starts, it goes for a pretty long time. So.
And it also, they're not showing on here yet, but there's bracts on that surround the flowers, and they're white to silver at first, and then they do fade to pink fairly often. It's also a close cousin of the Georgia fever tree, which is endemic to the, I think, southern South Carolina and parts of Georgia. And it looks very much like that if you're familiar with that tree, which is also its cousin. So flowers individually are actually an inch and a half or so long and tubular. And like Mark said, very fragrant. The swallowtail butterflies adore it too when it's in flower. So
yeah. Incredible plant. All right, Doug, you got a couple things.
Well, Tim was talking about, Tim was talking about the Rubiaceae family, and this is buttonbush. Buttonbush is Cephalanthus orbiculatus. Cephalanthus meaning head, probably referring to the spherical head of flowers, and orbiculatus because the head is spherical. And this is the same species as our local native one, which you see at the edge of ponds and stuff. But this is a selection from the desert Southwest. It's hard to believe it's the same species. And what really makes this a striking plant is that our local form of buttonbush has to have a wet site to really thrive. And this is growing in a full sun, hot, dry location, and it is just, getting better every day. The foliage is fairly different too. It's much narrower than our local form, and a long, glossy, narrow leaf that you see right here. Buttonbush is a great plant for pollinators, but also a really striking plant in the garden because there's not too many things with spherical heads of flowers.
Before we get letters in Cephalanthus occidentalis.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
it's the round shaped flower head there.
Well,
It's like a little orb.
occidentalis meaning western. And this is a new hybrid vitex or chase tree. It's one called Flipside. Flipside might be the trademark name, but if you see it in the garden center, it's going to be labeled Vitex Flipside. And it gets that name because the top of the leaves are green, but if you look at the underside of the leaves, they're purple. So that's a really nice feature. And I like that feature, but the reason why I'm excited about this Vitex is because there's a lot of breeding work going on to produce shorter Vitex because the regular forms of one of its parent, the common Vitex Angus castus, wants to be, 15, 20 feet tall. And the best forms of it with the big inflorescence like Shoals Creek and there's a number of others, very similar ones, are very, very big shrubs. They can be kept smaller by cutting them back hard. But this plant is now probably third summer and it's about 6 foot tall. It might get up to about 8 foot tall, but that's 8 foot tall without any pruning to keep it smaller. And it's a hybrid between Vitex agnus castus and Vitex trifoliata. And despite being a hybrid, the plant was actually covered in bumblebees a little while ago when I cut this down. So hybrids are not always, in hybridizing plants, they do not always become unattractive to me. This is certainly the case where this interspecific hybrid is still a superb plant for bumblebees. So these two I'm really excited about. I didn't think about it until I cut them and had them together. They're really fun together, these two very distinct shapes, spikes and spheres. I think for planting of summer blooming shrubs, just throw in a rose of Sharon and you're good to go.
Right. So got some things to kind of whet the appetite and get things going, but we're here to answer your questions. So you can unmute yourself and ask your question out loud. We can hear you. If you're too shy or you don't have a microphone, you can type it in the chat and Chris will read it to us. But we'd love to have you ask out loud.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Are there any indications that Piedmont clay soil is deficient in magnesium or calcium? My reasons for asking that are sometimes rhododendron mavens will recommend 5-part gypsum, 1 part Epsom salt to top dress the root ball of rhododendron. And secondly, this spring I have some chlorosis on some of my ironwood trees, some of not bad, but some chlorosis on ironwood tree, wild cherry, and a small percentage of deciduous and evergreen azaleas. Not on any azaleas, but so that's kind of the source of my question. So I've posed the question to the Department of Agronomy, and they just say, no, it's never a problem because we always tell everybody to use dolomitic lime.
Right.
But
your agronomy, they've got different.
Yeah.
They're coming from different viewpoints. It's the old if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So, probably from the horticulture department, you get a little bit different answer. Doug, you work a lot with soils. You want to talk about this? Don't get your mic there.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget my mic. Your question is very general. You were asking, do clay soils are they lacking in calcium and magnesium? I wouldn't worry about the broad question you asked. I would just have your own soil tested because depending on what you've applied, the pH and the amount of calcium and stuff might be very different than your next door neighbor if they've done nothing to the soil. And always keep in mind on a clay soil, if you're adding phosphorus and potassium every year, they build up and you can build them up to a toxic level and that'll inhibit the uptake of other elements. And, you can end up with deficiencies in plants because the phosphorus and potassium are too high. So, get your soil tested. I think that'd be the best place to start.
Well, if I may follow up, I have done that, and I have naturally high potassium and naturally very low phosphorus. But on the soil test, the only way you can get them to tell you magnesium and calcium seems to be to specify something like you're growing corn or strawberries.
Right.
And so on the one sample that I've sent them like that, I get back 19% magnesium, 60% calcium, which I don't really know how to interpret. But
that's going to be just fine your soil. In general, red clay, southeastern red clay soils are quite nutrient rich. They tend to hold on to their nutrients very well. In growing in our native soils, having a micronutrient deficiency is going to be pretty rare unless it's under exceptionally high cultivation regimes, like field crops and vegetable gardens. In general, that shouldn't be a problem. Most of the rhododendron growers are shown on the calcium because rhododendrons grow naturally in, they like acidic soils, but they grow on limestone typically. I would think the corrosive that you're seeing, especially since it's over such a wide range of plants, it probably has more to do with environmental factors. All the rain we had this winter could have done something. I don't think it's.
Yeah. I mean, we had 50% above average rain for 2020, literally. So, I mean, I attribute it to that too, but I couldn't quite figure out.
Well, nutrients are held on in various levels of attachment, how tight they're held. And so what was readily available might have leached away, but there's going to be plenty more that's being held tight by those clay particles that will become more available.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Who's that? Me?
Yep.
Mary. Okay. Jack and I had opportunity to be at the Ralston Garden on Monday. It's a beautiful area to tour, saw lots of beautiful things, but one that would really turned me on was the Cobra Lily, and in the Asian Valley area. And I was wondering, what are the conditions for growing? I know shaded and everything, but as far as soil, and also does it bloom or does it just get those funny tassels that were at the bottom of it?
All right, that's great. That's about Cobra lilies. Do any of our interns want to weigh in? Y'all can weigh in. You can be wrong. We'll correct you if you're wrong. Tim, you want to take that one?
Yeah, we're talking about some of the ericemas in the garden. The Cobra lilies or jack in the pulpits. They typically like partial shade to even a fair amount of shade. You won't typically see them out in the open too much. Though if they'll take it if they have to, if they aren't as happy. It's either that or you were talking maybe seeing some of the Amorphophallus. But the Cobra lilies, if you're talking ericemas, they probably flowered for us anywhere from March and early April into April. There are a handful that have flowered later in the season. Some of the in the lap house, I think you have some of the consanguiniums have just finished up. There's a little later flowering one. But again, partial shade is probably ideal, but they'll take shade. If they have to, they'll take some sun. In our climate, they like more the shaded side. The flowers are held under a spathe and a spade, and they're in a spadix in the spathe, which modified leaf. And if you're familiar with jack in the pulpit, it's this kind of, hooded inflorescence. And that's what you would have seen earlier in the year. You probably may have been seeing some of the fruit forming now on the spent inflorescence at this point.
Yeah, so these, think of, arums that grow out, or peace lilies, same family. You've got the jack in the pulpit, you've got the modified part of the flower, that's showy, the spade, and then the actual flower is the little jack inside that pulpit. And so the flowers on the Cobra lilies, the ericemas, tend to be mostly greens and browns, burgundies. There are some white ones. There are some that have pinks and are pretty, they're more interesting generally than beautiful. But they can be quite showy. And then they're followed by a spike of usually red-orange fruits if you have male and female flowers.
But does it multiply under the ground and
So
reproduce?
it's a bulb, and so they will offset and you get bigger and bigger clumps. You can dig them up just like other bulbs.
Okay. Well, that's great. Thanks for that information. I agree with the young lady about the root beer plant. The leaf on that is amazing. So
Yeah, that one spreads very quickly underground.
thank you.
It smells like root beer.
Oh, it does. Okay, thank you.
Cool. That's very cool.
Have other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm growing cucumbers for the first time this year, and I have like a nice vining plant with a few cucumbers on it already, but I'm experiencing something where it's really thick on one end, and on the far end that's not connected to the plant, it's really, really thin and not the same color green. It's a lighter green. And I was wondering if you guys know why it's doing that and what I can do to resolve that so that I have a more even fruit production.
I'm not positive, but when a cucumber fruit doesn't develop properly like that, it might be because the flower wasn't fully pollinated, because it's only going to develop if all those seeds are growing inside the fruit. Now, one way you could get around it, if you're willing to start your plants from seed, is go into a good vegetable seed catalog and select a variety that's one meant for outdoor culture, not greenhouse culture, but a variety that sets fruit without pollination. And then that wouldn't matter. That if you don't have adequate pollinators, and that is the problem, that'd be one way to get around it. The seedless cucumbers that you buy in the grocery store, those set fruit without pollination. The term is parthenocarpic, I believe.
The vine itself is also yellowing, and some of the leaves have like dried up and fallen off. I have it with other squash, and this other squash plants seem to be thriving. So I'm not sure if there's maybe a watering issue as well, if it's getting too much from the rain.
Well, it could be too much rain, but more often it's not the amount of rain, but not inadequate drainage. But I also could not grow squash or cucumbers or any other members of that family in my former garden because I had such bad root knot nematodes. Something like the summer squash would bear their first crop, and by the time they were ready to harvest, the plants were dead. And when I pulled out the plants, I realized that the roots were all knotted up with root knot nematodes. So that could be a possible reason.
What is root knot nematode?
Nematodes are little microscopic worm-like creatures. Not all of them are bad creatures, but there are a lot of them that attack plant. And the root knot nematodes live in the roots of plants, and the root, instead of being long and slender, is all knotted up.
Last question is what's a good response to root knot nematodes?
Plant a cover crop of a mighty mustard over winter, and that will reduce your nematode populations by 80 to 90%.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, nematodes are something that you're not going to kill with pesticides. So it's really about maintaining it. A lot of people garden in raised beds and containers to deal with it. The mustard is a great way to do it. It's also great for the soil. But pretty much anywhere where tobacco was cultivated, which is basically everywhere in the Southeast, you can have issues with root knot nematodes. You got any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Excellent.
Actually, I have 2 or 3 questions.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I mean, my garden is perfect. There are no problems at all, except one.
Dear.
Well, no, first, thank you all for everything you're doing at the Ralston. It's especially last year. It's still my favorite place in the world to go.
Thank you.
So the worst thing in the world for me is that I have some variegated agaves from various sources, and especially is it called Desmetiana, the beautiful form. And I think you have one on the roof there, or you have in the past. It's pale. The variegation is pale, and the green center is pale. It looks like it's sort of been in a dark basement for too long or something, but it really hasn't. And I sort of read something about too much sun causing the variegation to sort of pale out. Is there any knowledge there about that?
Where did you have it over the winter? And then was it inside? I'm assuming for the winter, if it's that one, because that's a tropical one.
It was in an unheated space where we keep plants.
But it was dark, right?
No, it wasn't dark. It was actually.
But it was lower light being inside through the winter. I'm just guessing maybe then moving it outside into the higher light intensity. Did it fade out then?
Well, I moved it very slowly because I do that. I sort of incrementally go. I put it in the shade now, sort of more shade, and the variegation is stronger.
Okay. So, it might just have been the light intensity from moving indoors to outdoors. That's my guess, but
too much.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, that's not something I've come across with them really fading out in a lot of sun. Doug, have you experienced that?
No. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sure what's going on. It's not sunburned, is it?
No.
It's really okay.
No, it just looks like it looks like it needs more sun. It's sort of that pale. The green is usually a lot stronger, and it's.
Does it need fertilizer?
Possibly. I don't do it very often, so.
Well, that might help.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, agaves don't need a lot of fertilizer, but they actually respond very well to richer soils and water as long as they have excellent drainage. They'll grow faster. Of course, with ones like Desmetiana that are not hardy, that you have to move in and out, you may not want to push growth on them too hard, but a little light fertilizer. And what I usually tell people with things like agaves is whatever fertilizer you use, just go at a half or a third, whatever the kind of the low end of the recommended rate is.
Okay. Well, can I go back to Doug for a second on his phosphorus and potassium? Because we actually have that problem in one of our ornamental gardens. And I talked to the county and with my soil analysis, and we're off the charts with potassium and phosphorus. So the county recommended that we just add red clay. So what would you say, what is the solution then to kind of toxic levels of potassium and phosphorus?
I'm not really sure there's a really good solution other than, many years going by, maybe. Your idea of adding soil, well, yeah, if you put too much salt in something, you can correct that by diluting it. And so you could deal with your problem by adding more soil.
Dilute the soil that's there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's bound to the clay. The clay takes fertilizer and makes it into a slow release fertilizer because it's bound to the clay and it's there available to plants. But yeah, that's something that I don't think is ever talked about enough. I've worked in a number of gardens, and in the older parts of the gardens where, people had been religiously applying fertilizer, certainly once a year, probably many times a year, and applying lime every year. In all of those gardens, the phosphorus and potassium were at toxic levels. And in some of those gardens, they had made, a good North Carolina red clay alkaline. And it's really hard to turn an alkaline soil back to slightly acid soil. So, when read about plant care, it's always, fertilize them once a year or twice a year or something like that. But no, get your soil tested first. You might not need any more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's sort of what that's what happened to us.
Yeah, and adding clay will definitely help because it binds there. Now it'll bring in some of its own, but also one thing you can do is just broadcast annual plants, whether it's a legume or a mustard or whatever. Just if you do that, for several, it takes a while, but whatever you get growing there, it will help with that. It'll help just take up some of that and reduce it, but it's a long-term solution.
Right.
Yeah, this question is sort of for Mark. Mark's idea is a good one, but I sort of think one step might be plant those cover crops, but when they are, you're ready to cut them down, remove them. Don't incorporate it in the soil. That's the way of farmland becomes depleted of fertilizer, because you remove the crops year after year and don't replace any of the fertility. But in your case, at least for a bunch of years, that would be desirable. So, if there's another part of your garden that's doesn't have toxic levels of phosphorus and potassium, those crops you've grown and harvested and removed could go there, or you could give them away to somebody with a new garden that needs those elements. But certainly people that are trying to create meadow gardens, they often cut things down and remove them so that the fertility is decreased on those lands rather than increased.
I see.
Great point. Yeah, if you grow them and then put them back, you're just recycling them. But so yeah, cut them and compost them, or they'll make great compost. But and I don't know if there are particular annual crops that would be better than others. There's probably a lot of times phosphorus is an issue at strip mined sites, so there may be some good information out there for what you can plant on strip mined sites that will survive and grow.
Okay. Good.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me make sure my volume's up. Last year and this year, I have had a problem with some of the pollinator plants I've been trying to grow with something piercing and circling the stem of the flower stalk right before they bloom. It's been true with my echinacea and the black-eyed Susans, the Rudbeckia Fulgida. And this year I had some new plants. It was a downy skullcap it did it to, and now it's doing it on some Japanese sage I have. And so it'll just they're just this piercing marks that are brown, and they make a spiral going up, and then the stem just totally droops over. And I think that it may have something to do with some type of plant hopper. Have a lot of these little adults that have the stripes. And then, I have a fair number of those mealy looking ones, the white fuzzy around. But is that something common for other people?
Either one of y'all want to take that?
I don't encounter that much.
No. Maybe remove them though, and destroy them. I hate to say it, just as a preventative long term.
Remove what?
Remove the affected stalks anytime.
Yeah. This year I'm doing that because it's spread out to more plants. So I'm cutting them off below the piercing. And then, but I've tried to look on the internet, and there's just so much misinformation, and if you Google spiral pierced insect damage on those flowers, they always just say, leafhoppers don't cause hardly any damage.
Yeah, well, one of the benefits you get from us is we've been doing this long enough to be perfectly comfortable not knowing things and letting you know. So seems like the consensus here is never really had an experience with that being a real big widespread problem. Okay. So, and don't have good knowledge about it. So we don't want to send you the wrong way. If you can take a stem that's showing that, take some good pictures of it and get it to your extension agent or the state pathologist. They can tell you what exactly it is and, some potential remedies for it. There's still a tendency to rely on chemicals for it. There you go. The Plant Disease and Insect Clinic. Chris has put it up on our screen anyway. The Plant Disease and Insect Clinic. They're great people. I often get emails from them with "What's this plant?" But they'll tell you what it is and then tell you some ways to treat it. But generally, what I do with if I'm having real problems is, I'll just get rid of either the entire plant, but certainly the affected areas. And if it's real bad, bag it up and throw it away. Don't compost it because your compost at home is not getting hot enough to kill insect eggs and spores and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
We call this Stump the Chump, and so you stumped us.
Well, I've been working with Mark Baumgardner on our county agent in Orange, sending him some pictures. And then I did it's kind of waning. So I just cut a stem and put it in a bag for him today. So I will take that, and see if he can get it to the right people.
Yeah. And the Insect and Disease Clinic, that's where they're sending it. You can skip Mark if you need to and get it straight there. I mean, extension agents are pulled so thin. They have just a million and one things that they are responsible for. So please, don't be afraid to help them out by sending it straight on to the disease clinic.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question.
Yes.
The question for me was about that button bush. Where's the best long-term location for a button bush? I got one at the plant sale.
From our plant sale?
Yeah.
I wonder if she got a dino.
Yeah, the most recent one we did was the Asian button bush, the Adina rubella. I planted that in just about any location. I've seen it in the wild. It's growing kind of like our button bush, usually growing more on moving water, but near streams, not with its feet in the water, but close by. But generally, it's pretty easy. I'll let Tim. You want to?
We have it in an irrigated bed, but it's nothing that I keep wet by any means. It's just average soil. It's in the east end of the mixed border. It's had shade whenever we had the holly hedge, and it did fine. Now it gets full blazing sun because there's no holly hedge. It's a really versatile plant for us. If it's the Adina, this one right here, the smaller. Yeah, that's one. It's not as finicky as Cephalanthus, our native form of the Cephalanthus, which wants a bit more moisture. It's been through droughts. It hasn't had any issues, so it's pretty versatile if you have the Adina.
Yeah, and our native button bush that Doug talked about, the Cephalanthus, that generally is it really prefers our native one prefers a damp site like by a pond edge or in a spot that stays wet. It'll go in more average soils, but it can look a little raggedy in those spots. We're going to be propagating this particular one that Doug was talking about that's from the Southwest and getting that out to folks because we really think it's almost like a different plant than our native one, just with similar shaped flowers, but it really grows almost completely different. Hope that answered your question. The Adina really can grow almost anywhere.
I have a question about root black knot disease on a purple leaf plum tree.
Okay.
I've read dozens of articles. I've emailed with Wake County Extension Service. I've just cut off every bit of the black, warty, knotty looking growth that I can find. And I've read everything from cut 2 to 4 inches below it to 8 to 10 inches below it, which that's kind of a big difference, but that's what I've read. I cut as far below as I could. So my question now is, do I need to treat it with fungicide at all now or late winter, early spring? Because the advice has got me totally confused. I even talked to the nursery director of a nursery real close to me that I have a lot of respect for. And he said, put Funginil on it. And all the articles after I bought the stuff, all the articles I read said, don't ever use Funginil after, and I'm not swearing, shuck split. And I looked up what shuck split means, and it's something that some stage of fruiting. Well, the fruit's all gone. It's all fallen off the tree. It's over. So does that mean don't apply fungicide till next spring, because that's when black knot disease releases the spores, is in late winter, early spring? I mean, is there, I've read a little bit about the life cycle. Is there any point doing fungicide now or not?
Okay, I'm going to pass this on to one of our guys in just a second, maybe not. I don't know if they want this one. Here's what my first question to you would be, why are you going through so much trouble for a purple leaf plum?
Because the tree is,
they're great plants out there, right? Purple leaf plum.
The tree is 25 years old. It was 30 feet tall. It was absolutely gorgeous. It's now a quarter of that size, but I like the purple leaves. They don't green out like Japanese maples do. They stay purple all season long. I like the flowers. The flowers are fragrant. Japanese maples don't have fragrant flowers.
Oh yeah, I'm not telling you replace it with the Japanese maple.
No, and I have Japanese maples. I love them, but what I'm concerned about is I don't want it spreading to my Prunus mume or my Yoshino cherry or my Akami cherry, or I have a pie cherry in the backyard. I don't want it spreading to the other stuff. But yeah.
I'd say prune it 2 to 6 inches above the ground. 25 years is kind of you're getting to a lifespan for a cherry and plum, the prunus like that. There are ones that are older, but here in the Southeast, you're going to be fighting a losing battle at this point. You'd be better off to get rid of it and replant.
Really? Okay. Because other than having all these black, knotty looking growths on a lot of twigs, the tree was really healthy. It was putting on a lot of new growth every year. Japanese beetles eat a few holes in the leaves. I don't care about that. But the tree was really healthy. And this year it produced a bumper crop of plums, just like my Prunus mume did. I've never had such a good crop as I did this year. So the tree seemed very healthy, except for these black growths on it.
Except for the black growths that have caused you to cut your tree down by half.
Right.
I feel like Doug has something to say, so I'm going to pass it to him. There are times when, we let things go is kind of my feeling on that. You're right. You can have a tree and leave the black knot on there, but you do run the risk of it spreading to your other trees. And that's, so I don't spray fungicides in my landscape. Fungi are more closely related to you than insects, and they tend to be more toxic to people than many other pesticides. So I stay away from them personally. If I really have something that needs fungicide, I rip it out. There's some production things where fungicide, I do that. I just don't, but that's a personal thing. I don't like spraying chemicals because it's hot and stinks and gross. So I just don't.
I agree with you there. I don't. I've never used a fungicide before. I just didn't want it to spread or anything. And everything that I was reading said, cut these things off and then spray it. But is that because people are wanting it for, an orchard to grow the fruit or something? The advice, I can't distinguish between whether the advice is aimed at a commercial orchard or, someone with an ornamental tree. And is it okay that I've just cut it off? And if I see any new black warty things, I just keep cutting them off?
I agree with everything Mark said. And so I'm just sort of reiterating what he said, but and I agree that purple leaf plums are nice and that the color remains vibrant all through the growing season. And most purple foliage things turn a dreary red, green, brown. Yeah. And I was, when you started listing all the other species of prunus that you don't want to get infected by this plant, it's like, that seems like more than enough reason to get rid of this one purple leaf plum. And it's not like it's took, forever for it to become a specimen plant. Go out and buy yourself a new one. Buy the hybrid one that has large flowers. In 5 years, it's going to be making a respectable display, but get rid of that typhoid Mary before it infects your other plants.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. And probably most of what you're reading is based on orchard research that is being kind of repurposed for home landscape.
Thundercloud.
Yeah. Chris is asking us if there's a plant that we recommend, and Thundercloud is a great purple leaf plum that'll really.
That's what it was. That's what it
was. Yeah. I mean, it's still a great plant, and
there's also, what is it, Prunus virginiana that starts off green and turns purple.
The Prunus virginiana, Schubert, and there's Canada Red. Yeah. Canada Red that has a really nice color. I think of them as it probably doesn't have as the flowers aren't fragrant. You're not getting the same type of flowers, but the purple is really good.
I mean, when it's nearing the end of the bloom, it's the petals are a real pale pink, and it's almost like pink snow coming down. I mean, it's a tree that my husband and I have really loved for years. And
so treat yourself to a new one.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Prunus bluriana.
Yep. Prunus bluriana. Not quite as purple leaf, but good flowers.
Fragrance.
Really pretty in bloom.
Yeah.
Always some of the Crepe Myrtles that come out now with purple leaves.
Yeah. There's some great purple leaf Crepe Myrtles that are, they're purple.
And they need, and I have one of them, Delta Jazz. And let me tell you what, that doesn't flower unless you have a lot of sun. I've had it for years.
Oh, yeah.
And it's getting as close to full sun as I can give anything in my yard, which is 6 hours, and it doesn't bloom.
If you cut down some of these old trees, then you'll have more sun.
Yeah.
All right.
I got a couple of questions.
All right.
One on that Vitex. I have Shoal Creek and Delta Blues and that flip side. Do you find the flip side is a thirstier plant than the other two?
Here. I would say I don't have an answer to that because this is just it's the beginning of its third summer in that site, or maybe even just its second summer. It was planted 2 years ago, probably late summer, early fall. So I just don't know. Ask me at the end of this summer.
I would say I do think of Vitex trifoliolata as being as needing more water, but that's probably because I've grown it more as a annual kind of almost plant because it's not quite as hardy.
Yeah, mine tends to wilt faster. The other two, the Shoal Creek and the Delta Blues, doesn't matter how little water they get, they're always looking fine. That one tends to wilt faster for me. The second question I have, I'm in Brunswick County, and we're blessed with two types of soil: beach sand and swamp muck. As a master gardener, I recommend that people do some amendments to their soil because of the extremes with the black swampy stuff that I happen to garden in. It's very anaerobic. You stick a shovel in it and you get a good whiff of sulfur. And I recommend that to open up the soil structure to give the plants a chance to drain out, because we tend to suffer a lot from root rot. And then people on the beach, it's the exact opposite. They don't have, the sand just doesn't allow water to stay by the plant roots long enough. My question is I'm getting information from other people in the extension service where some people recommend it and some people don't. What's your position on soil amendments?
Oh man, soil amendments, adding organic matter to the soil is for the most part good for what ails you. It is if you have that swamp muck, if you have red clay, adding organic matter helps provide drainage and airspace. If you've got soil that's broken down because it's been over-tilled and you don't have good structure, organic matter helps build structure back in your soil. If you have sand, it helps with moisture retention. So, there are very few cases where I'd say adding organic matter isn't helpful to soils. I guess, we talked about having soils that had toxic levels of some nutrients. In those cases, you may want to be careful about what you're adding and how high it is in certain nutrients. But otherwise, I don't know that is there more to add to that than it's good for what ails you?
Yeah, it's like a healthy diet for yourself. Feed your soil organic matter. It doesn't even have to be turned into the soil, just a good mulch on the top. Yeah, we've got on our YouTube channel, we've got some, Chris, we have some of Bill Fontenot's talks from Gardening in the South. If you go on our website and go to our YouTube channel and go to the Gardening in the South, Dr. Bill Fontenot, who has been doing soils. He created the soils lab here at NC State. Really amazing. He has given some great talks, and we have one there about building your soil without having to go in and till down 8 or 12 inches and turn in organic matter and till it back in. And because most of us, you start gardening, you start sticking plants in, things grow, and you become a better gardener and you realize, hey, I'd really like my plants to grow better, but you don't want to rip everything out and start over. He's got some great information on building your soil by adding organic matter to the top and letting the natural processes happen. And it happens pretty quickly to start building your soils. So I definitely always recommend adding organic matter. I do think if you're doing a lot to your soils, as Doug said early on, always get a soil test. It just doesn't hurt. And if you are high in one thing or another, you may, want to be a little more careful about what kind of organic matter you're adding in. But no, usually it's nothing but helpful.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I have a question.
Excellent.
Okay, I have a Elysium parviforum Florida Sunshine that I got at Plant Delight's nursery this spring, and all the leaves have dropped off.
Okay.
And I don't know what to do. Is it dead? I think so.
Nothing good is happening if all your leaves have dropped off your Elysium. Generally pretty tolerant plants. It would most likely, in my mind, be that too much water would be the problem rather than too little.
It's in a pot, so I doubt it got too much water.
Well, if it's in a pot, maybe
the drainage failed.
Yeah, if
hole got clogged.
I check to make sure that that it's not holding water in that container. Perhaps it dried out too much, but generally they're pretty tolerant of drying out, at least for short periods. If the stems are still in good shape, hopefully it'll flush out again.
That's what I was going to say. Check the roots if you're digging in there. See what the roots look like.
Should I give it some sort of amendment to sort of stimulate the roots?
What I would do is I would unpot it, look at it. If it seems like it's holding too much moisture, if it smells bad, then you've got a problem with your drainage in the pot. If the roots look pretty good and the tops are still supple and whatnot, I'd go ahead and repot it. Make sure you're putting it in a pretty loose mix. I keep an eye on it. That you got.
What kind of lighting?
Yeah, I tend to think that it got too wet, like maybe standing water. And there are a number of ways that drainage can fail in a pot. If it's a pot sitting on the ground, on the earth, a tree root or any root can grow in there and get big enough to clog up the drainage hole. Or sometimes just a heavy pot sitting on the soil will end up so firmly sunk into the ground that it no longer drains. So there are a number of ways how that a pot can stop draining properly.
Well, it went from a 3.5-inch pot when I bought it, and I said, this is going to be too small. It's going to dry out too fast. So I put it in something that was more like a 5 or 6-inch, pot like this, square. And it was sitting in an area that was getting probably 4 to 6 hours of sun, and it was actually on a slope. So I don't know. Well, I will take your advice and look at it and see what I can do. What about root stimulant type stuff? Is there anything I could maybe poke it along?
If all the leaves dropped on there, it could just be a shock to the system. I wouldn't try to find something to put on there to. I don't think there's anything that's going to help it more than time if it's still alive.
Hope.
Yeah, exactly.
It was sort of pricey for the size of pot and all, and I'm thinking, oh God.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have another question.
Yeah.
We have a couple of beds which are, I'm going to say, 25 feet away from a white oak tree. And I know you're not supposed to really plant under trees, but I don't know, that's sometimes not true, but I know that under the big live oaks at the Ralston, those big mounds have been created. It looks to me on top of many of the roots, quite large mounds. So, what's happening in these beds here is that the soil does stay very dry, even 25 feet away, which I guess is sort of near the drip line. But so is it okay to mound up if I really want to have plants there? It really is okay to mound on top of roots?
Yeah, I mean, people will tell you no, but yes, you can do it. Where we do it over mature trees like that, we use a lot of permatil. Tim, what is it with a third, half permatil? It's
20%, I think, is what we
20% permatil. So there's that. What roots need? Roots are there for structure to hold up the plant. They're there to provide nutrients. They're there to take up water, and they need air in there as well. So when you're putting soil on top of them, really what you're doing is you're getting rid of the air. So by making a lighter mix with permatil, you're allowing more air to move through there. We didn't pile right up around the trunk, because you do that, you start rotting away the trunk. We're pulled away from that, and so we are allowing some spaces where we're not mounding up like that. it is still going to dry out under there because the roots will grow up. The tree roots will grow up through those mounds, and that'll be the new normal ultimately for it.
Kind of buys you some time.
But it buys you some time.
I see.
Established before they have to deal with that dryness.
Yeah.
So are those beds irrigated under the live oaks?
Yes.
I see.
I'll just add that, Mark answered correctly, but that those beds are irrigated, but they are not irrigated every Tuesday because it's Tuesday. There's no automatic control. So we only irrigate them when they get desperately dry in order to keep them in presentable condition.
Because it's a lot of hellebores, as I remember.
Yeah, but there's a serum and hosta and ferns and, all kinds of things up there. I drive in and I go by places and it's be pouring rain and the irrigation's on for the turf and for the beds and everything. And we got to get away from that. Water is not unlimited here. We sometimes feel like it is, but if you were gardening here in 2007, there were water restrictions, and we can't keep pretending like the water is unlimited. And there is all people are doing when they over irrigate their gardens is making their gardens more reliant on excess water. When you do water for a long time and water very deeply and encourage roots to go down. Do not water for short periods often. That's just recipe for making plants weak and reliant on us. So my home garden, things get planted and I water them in really well. If it gets really hot and dry, sometimes I'll put a sprinkler out and run it, for an extended period. And but I also look at the forecast, and sometimes if it's been really dry, I will run my irrigation before rain is in the forecast, so that any rain that does come actually soaks into the ground rather than just runs off the top. But always err on the side of underwatering rather than overwatering. You'll kill fewer plants and you'll make your plants much, much more resilient in the long run because they'll be forced to really root down, root out, and be able to kind of take care of themselves.
But you also mulch heavily, probably.
At my house? No.
Yeah. No?
No. In my woodland garden, it's whatever leaves fall. That's it. My sun garden, I put down mulch about every other year. I'll put down some mulch.
Well, good.
Plants are tougher than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yes.
A friend cut down 18 Bradford pears along her driveway, and she's looking for something to replant. It's compacted and it's going to be root competition from where the Bradfords had their roots. And she has social events. People drive between the trees to get out to the field to park.
Yeah.
I have one addition to make there. I had a Bradford pear and I put I cut it off as a stump and I put pear scions on it. And I now have a moon glow coming up that's about the size of my forearm. So that's what I did with my Bradford pears.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, but she's got 18 down her driveway and she has events and she needs something, that she can plant a decent size that'll take off. And
I'm going to pass around and get some suggestions. But before that, do you know what she what she wants in a tree?
Naturally, she wants low maintenance and that it flowers.
Its flowering is important for her. Okay. Yeah. A tree that I think is really underutilized and could be much more widely utilized and has that really nice shape of it is, and flowers aren't quite as showy, but they're fragrant, are little leaf lindens. I really like them, and you don't see them a lot, and they grow very well, and they're easy to maintain. Sometimes you get a little bit of beetle damage on the foliage, but I really love them.
What's the botanical name on those?
Cordata.
Okay, cordata.
Another one that I'll throw out there and then pass it around is we love our red buds here, and one that is not ours, but I think is really outstanding is Cerseus Canadensis Summer's Tower. It's a very upright form, so that when you have all those people driving in, they won't be getting smacked. The cars won't be getting smacked with the branches, because it's very upright. It's very, very vigorous grower. So you get a good sized tree pretty quickly. And I'll pass it around. We can go this way and see if Doug and interns or anybody else has some suggestions.
Where's Kathy live?
Kathy lives in the Charlotte area.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I know I recognize Kathy's name, but I didn't.
Yeah. I used to live in Gaston County. I like the Styrax family. Like the genus Styrax, or other relatives like our silver bells, which are generally taller growing than Styrax. But there's other relatives like Cynojackia. Really nice display of white flowers in spring. I'll let others come up with ideas.
I would suggest Cerseus, Canadensis. I mean, there's several of them out there, and they're really good trees, I think.
Hi, I'm a little bit less qualified than everybody for a flowering tree, but I think one thing that I've really enjoyed growing, if you're looking to mix it up, so maybe it's not the same trees all the way along, so maybe mixing in with the 18 with some unflowered things, is I've had a really good time growing some smaller taxodiums. And I think those are a little bit easier to maintain. Obviously, they're not flowering, and they could grow a little bit larger if you don't find the right kind of cultivar. But I think I always like seeing in a landscape a mix of different things if you didn't want to do the same 18 all the way down.
I'm going to jump in here because I know, and now that I'm thinking again, Kathy's probably shaking her head at our red bud selections, because I know she's had some issues with borers in her red buds in her personal garden. So, if those go off, I want to go back with what Doug said with the Styrax. The Styrax flower a bit later than a lot of the other spring flowering trees. They're a little bit later. A lot of those early spring flowering trees are maybe a little bit early for a lot of the events that your friend has, depending on what they are. And Styrax bring you on through that a little bit later, which may be great. I'll also throw one more. Hopefully, I'm not taking somebody else's. But if you ask me for low maintenance, easy, tough flowering tree, I'm always going to say the Chinese French tree. That's just such an easy plant.
Something that's super used here, crepe myrtles. They flower for so long, and they're really tolerant. I did like Thomas's idea of mixing it up, and I will add on to the taxodium. Great fall color to the foliage. They're very tolerant of compacted soil. So if they're going to be doing any events and driving it around them, that might actually not be a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to add real quickly that, Tim kind of stole my thunder with the whole crepe myrtle thing. That's what I was going to say. There's some really nice selections out there. And not too many plants are going to enjoy having root compaction, traffic like that. So I think crepe myrtle will probably be one that could take it if any could.
Come on, Skylar. You gotta get one for us.
Thank you, go.
I was thinking that, but I thought that the really cool flowers out there was like from a pomegranate tree. I don't know if that's like super high maintenance or not, but I think it's really pretty.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They aren't tree-like, but they would be good in LA.
Okay.
Thank you very, very much. Those were great suggestions. I know she'll be thrilled.
All right. Thank you. Other questions?
I can ask one more.
Sure.
There's a beautiful little dianthus that you have kind of in the scree and on the roof that has a tall flower stalk. It's just so beautiful, and I never see it anywhere in the, I just haven't looked that much for it, but is it available anywhere on the market?
I'm gonna let Tim tell you a little bit about it, but I will say this: probably not available. But we are always propagating plants for sales, for giveaways, for all these kinds of things. And we go out and why haven't we propagated that for a sale at any point? The only reason we haven't is because we haven't. So. People who are coming to our, especially if you're in the area and you come to our plant sales and things like that, give us suggestions for things that we have growing here that you'd love to see, and we'll put those things on the list to propagate. I won't guarantee that it'll happen, and we won't take your name and call you when it does happen, because that would kill us. But we'll definitely put the selection, the idea in the hopper. You want to say a little bit about that, Dianthus?
I think I know which one you're talking about. I think you're talking about the really airy one, tiny flowers. Is that right? Okay, right. It's Gigantiformis, I believe.
No, Gigantia.
I don't think it's Gigantia.
Gigantiformis subspecies Pontiadaria.
Can you? Okay, yeah, Gigantiformis variety Pontiadaria. I think, where'd we get it? We get it from an Indexemnum, because we've had that since 2007, I think. And we planted it originally on the roof and in the screed both. And it self-sows all over the place. It is airy, so it's not overwhelming, but it's not one of the real compact ones, but that have great fragrance. But it is a really nice one to intermingle with other things. It's not an overwhelming plant. So, but it does, at least in our scree type situations, it does come up where it wants to come up everywhere. But I don't know if it'll do it in the general garden, but something that has naturalized throughout the United States that it reminds me of that is the Deptford pink, which I'm going to blank on. Is it Dianthus? Oh, I used to know it. Anyways, it's very similar species. It's almost a weed at times too. It's naturalized throughout the Eastern United States. Grew it. It came up in the weeds above my parents' house in Western Pennsylvania, but it's very reminiscent of that.
And what's it called again?
The Deptford pink. And I can't think of the species at this moment. I used to know.
Common name.
But it's a naturalized species of Dianthus. Might give you something similar. Okay, yeah. But we can see if we can come up with some of these at some point. But again, we won't be able to tell you exactly when they're on.
Well, I'm putting in my vote.
Use those because it does come up all over on our roof. Yeah. But it's not overwhelming. It's not a major weed or anything.
No. But it seems to like the dry.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Well, I would. I hope all of y'all will join us either in person next Tuesday or right here, same bat time, same bat channel on Wednesday. for our interns tour. This is always one of our favorites. One, because we don't have to do it, so we don't have to think about it. But also, it's a lot of fun seeing what the interns are into. Every year it is different, and why they pick the plants are different every year, and different between people. So it's a whole lot of fun. So I hope you'll join us for that, because it's always interesting. If you do, make sure to ask really tough questions, because we always like seeing them. You look like a deer in headlights. Staff is always there to support them and help out with the really tough questions. Like Chris said, a lot of great programs happening, some on site, some online, some both. Want to thank all of y'all for joining us, and thank all of y'all for supporting these programs, and we'll keep them going.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great 4th of July weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.